stuff.
Which
in
I
this
think is why
episode.
Obi-Wan feels guilty and thus goes to take care of Luke, because he's kind of like
right.
bearing
like,
the
I have to-
responsibility of letting Anakin go down that path, and also
Which-
like murdering his dad.
Right.
So like,
quote.
if you're gonna take
Which
the
is-
father figure out of the home, you better be ready to step up, and that's exactly what he did.
Hello and welcome to the Nerdiest podcast, where nerds talk about nerdy things, and we're very excited to bring you the first edition to a new annual Star Wars month. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited to start off hopefully a new tradition where today and next week and the week after, we're going to be talking all Star Wars. May is Star Wars month, and we're so excited to be here with you. We will be doing a 2-part series talking about the entire Skywalker saga. That is all 9 Star Wars movies. But today, we get to talk about episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because we've got a lot of thoughts on 7, 8, 9 that we decided needed its own episode. But today, we're breaking down the 6 Star Wars movies that everyone loves, but not everyone. Oh, we'll get to there. But first, I'd like to say that I'm here with my ride or die, Mr. Nick Barrett, as always, sporting his wonderful Mandalorian helmet from Galaxy's Edge. Mr. Nick, how are you today?
Well,
Give him a second. He's got it.
I'm assuming this sounds.
He can't.
I'm assuming that sounds really bad, so I'm not gonna keep that on.
Yeah,
because it doesn't sound
you
great.
look great.
And
You look great.
you probably don't want to listen to that for two
It's okay.
hours or however
You look
long
great.
this episode ends up being. Oh, there go. Okay, it's fine. My desk is falling apart. You know, just like my life, but it's okay.
Just a second. Just a little
We're still here.
wardrobe
It's
reset.
okay.
It's cool. We're great. My ride or die, Mr. Nick Barrett. How are you today?
I'm good. Ready to talk about some Star Wars. I'm
Yes,
a big
sir.
Star Wars fan. I don't know if anybody can tell from, poster on the wall if you're watching the video, lightsabers back there, the Mandalorian helmet, obviously, as you saw, the shirt. Like, Star Wars is my big franchise. So
yeah.
very excited to talk about Star Wars. I've been really tired lately, though. I'm going to keep it 100% honest with you. So I've been doing a lot of stuff for Nick with No K, putting out some shorts, recording some long-form content, which will hopefully be out relatively soon. I've done a couple live streams. We did a romance anime tier list. I just played through Doki Doki Literature Club again. By the time this episode comes out, maybe we did a Tears of the Kingdom stream. Maybe we did a Fortnite stream. I don't know.
Who's to say?
So there's that. Outside of that, though, I've been trying to find a much better work-life balance and not work as much as I live, Actually, much like the reel you sent me this morning, where he's
I was gonna say I sent you that reel last night.
don't have
that
a
was
work-life balance. No work-life balance. It should be an imbalance. You should always live more than you work. And that's what I've been trying to do, is go out and do more stuff. So a couple weeks ago, I went to a flea market with one of my friends from church, and I got 11 Blu-rays for $27.
Bruh.
Dude, it was kind of sick. let me see if I can remember what I got off the top of my head. I got Transformers 2, 4, and 5. So now I have all the Transformers on Blu-ray. I got Tomorrowland, Speed Racer. Actually, I can just pull up the picture. I'm so dumb. While I do that. So we had a good time at the flea market. I also got Link's crossbow training for the Wii. I can play that because I have a Wii U. Okay, here we go. I got those 3 Transformers, Speed Racer, Tomorrowland, 300, which I've never seen, but my mom said it was really good.
Because that's the Sparta movie, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I also got another copy of The Force Awakens, and you might be thinking, why did you do that? Because in a movie collection video that's not out yet, I recorded and I talked about how my Force Awakens case is different than the rest of my cases, and it drives me insane. So I was like, $3 to make them all uniform. Okay.
Yeah.
I also got V for Vendetta, which is a great movie, very topical to today. And I also got How to Train Your Dragon 1 and 2.
Bangers.
And then, because as I was looking through, the guy running the stand walked up and was like, saw that I had a handful. And he was like, hey, I'll give you 10 for 25. And I was like, oh, sick.
Sick.
So he was kind of like, if you buy a lot, I'll like negotiate with you. And I was like, okay, cool. So I got that. And then I found one that I did not expect to find, that I text Jackson and said, should I buy this? Like, it's only $3. What do I have to lose?
Yeah.
And he was like, let the intrusive thoughts win.
No, you got to go for it. Yeah.
So I bought a Blu-ray copy of Beauty and the Beast, The Enchanted Christmas. Why I have it, I don't know.
Beautiful.
But I
do.
So,
you know,
that was a really fun time to go out. And, like, we went out and got lunch and stuff. And it was just a nice day of hanging out, not doing anything too crazy, not working. So, and as I go into the summer, my schedule's freeing up a little bit more. So I'm trying to find time to, like, go out and do stuff with friends and just hang out and not be as stuck at the computer working all the time. Even if that means, like, I'm going to walk up to the clubhouse at the front of our neighborhood and go read some manga in the clubhouse for a bit. And, like, just do something that's not sitting at the desk working, staring at a screen. So that's my goal going into the summer. Whether or not I do that, I'm not entirely sure. But that's what I've been doing. I watched all 6 Star Wars movies in the span of a week, 2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks. Yeah. Well, there's also, just to piggyback on that, there's a difference, but there's like rest and then there's like a healthy rest, you know, in the sense where like sometimes like last night, me, my dad, my brother, and then my brother-in-law, we all came over and we squatted up on Fortnite last night. And we played for, I think, 2.5 hours. And we just grinded the whole time. We had so much fun. We were cracking up and it was just a really fun time. And I usually don't play that long, but we got like 2 victories. So we got 2 victories in a row, like to start, and then immediately fumbled every single game after that. So that's how it works. But at the time, like that was really restful and that was fun. But I also find myself like, it's not always restful to just sit in front of a screen and play a game. Like that's kind of depressing sometimes.
Right. And
so it's like finding the time to like, I'm going to go outside. I'm going to go like walk around this place. Like that's rest too. And so like, it's restful to go hang out with people, you know, like it doesn't have to be going to bed or like watching a movie, you know, like there's different types of rest. So anyway, going off of that, for my week is I got off of school. Praise God.
Halfway through college. Congratulations.
Halfway through college. Isn't that crazy? It feels like 2 days and 20 years.
You know what's so crazy? Not to like side tangent for a second.
Yeah.
But you're halfway through college. I've been out of college for 2 years, and we started this podcast before either of us were in college. Like that is so insane to me.
That's wild. Well, also like, I thought about you the other day when I was like, imagine graduating now. Like where I'm at now is like when you graduated because you did the 2-year program. And I was just like, Lord have mercy. Yeah. I would never be able to do that. Like I was just like, if I was searching for a job right now, like I'd flip. Like
it makes you feel a lot younger than you actually are.
Right.
Because most other college graduates are like 22, 23, 24.
Right.
And I'm over here like, I just turned 22. Oh, my birthday was last week. I forgot to mention that.
Yay.
So I'm 22 now, and it's like, wow, I still feel I'm the youngest person in my office by like 2 years, but still, it's kind of kooky crazy.
It's crazy. Girl, that's crazy. So yeah, I'm halfway through college now, and that's crazy. Just wait for the podcast when I tell you I graduated. That's gonna be something else.
Wait for the podcast when we find out you got married or had a kid.
Yeah, that's gonna be crazy.
Like, that's gonna be
crazy.
Wild.
When just be like, hey guys, this is my son. And just be like, whoa, hey.
Whoa.
Didn't you start this when you were like a child?
I did. Now I have one. Full circle.
So anyway, that's what's up. Yeah, this week I told myself like I'm going to get into a routine next week. And like, because there's some classes I need to clip, and don't look at me like that. Don't look at me like that. Because by routine, I mean, I'm going to get up not at 10 every day, and I'm going to like, start working on like new YouTube content, and like there's classes I need to clip. So I need to like start studying for that. And like, I need to write out like a goal list for my summer, because I work really well off of lists, and that can be like, if I can visually see what has to happen in a certain time frame, then I will be okay and I can get it done. So that's kind of really what I've been doing, just kind of resting as much as I can and watching a ton of Star Wars. I'm actually, honestly, I'm at a point right now where outside of Star Wars this week, I didn't really watch a whole lot. And usually summers where I like really hammer in some movies. And I will continue to do that after Star Wars. But I've really just been watching a lot of YouTube. And I've really enjoyed that. And so like every once in a while, like on my free, just if I have a free few minutes, I'll just scroll my YouTube homepage and start saving stuff to my watch later. So that when I hop on YouTube like later and I'm like, all right, I just want to watch something, but I don't want to watch for like 30 minutes, an hour. I just want like a quick little 10-minute thing before I go to bed. Then I have this long list of videos that I saved, and I'm like, all right, cool, let's go. So I don't know. If you think that YouTube isn't good anymore, you're not looking hard enough. That's what I have always said. There's some incredible content on YouTube out there.
Just out of sheer curiosity, how many videos do you have in your watch later playlist?
Oh, Lord have mercy.
I want to know who has more. I'm looking at mine right now. I might have you beat, but I also don't know enough about you. Like, I know you pretty well. I don't know enough about you to know if you've got me beat on watch later, though.
Right.
Because I do the same thing where I'm like, oh, that's cool, watch later.
Right. Well, I've had the same watch later playlist for years. And so, like, and also, I forget to take stuff out, like, all the time.
I love it when I'm scrolling my homepage and I see a video. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And then right above, it's like, from your watch later playlist.
From your watch later. And you're like, oh. That's why it looks cool.
I have...
What's your number?
2,361.
See, I have 762, which is a lot, but it's not 2,000. See, I have gotten a lot better. I've gotten a lot better about taking videos out. So like when I'm done with a video and it like goes back to the playlist, I'll like take it out of the playlist.
The first video in this playlist is from 7 years ago, and it's how Pixar uses music to make you cry.
I'm trying to scroll to the bottom for mine.
Just do sort date added oldest.
Oh, you're so right.
At the top. Don't scroll. I'm not scrolling through
date added oldest.
I'm not doing that. That's too much work.
My oldest watch later is Why Civil War Worked and Batman v Superman Didn't, from 5 years ago.
Dude, there's so many videos in here where I'm like, I want to watch them, but I don't have the time. Like, it's just so hard for me to get into video essays, and like, because I don't like watching them in parts. I want to watch it all at once.
Right. I love me a video essay. That's what most of my watch later is. So and then I'll find like a new channel and I'll like watch through like their best videos, like all the way through for like hours. And honestly, TBH, it's a little more addicting than TV for me.
That's fair.
Which is a problem. But I feel like I'm getting a lot more insight on things I care about than if I watched TV. You know?
Right.
Like I'm gonna start some shows soon. There's a couple shows I've been meaning to start.
What?
Yes, I'm going to start Demon Slayer soon. So I'm going to start that soon. I really need to watch The Bear. I'm going to try to start The Bear. And honestly, I kind of want to start Twin Peaks because that show looks really, really good. But anyway, that's kind of my week. That's what I went up to. But mainly I've just been watching Star Wars. So that's that. There was some news we could cover, but for the sake of time, we were like, bro, this is Star Wars month.
We gotta just.
We don't
jump
need
into
to talk
it.
about.
We don't have.
We just gotta jump.
Time.
Let's just jump right into it.
I
and
feel
just
like
talk about some freaking Star Wars.
These next two episodes, this one and the part 2.
Right.
Did you go over how we were splitting it up? I had the helmet on, so I couldn't really hear it.
I did at the beginning, but you can remind them.
Okay, so for context, this is going to be the biggest revisit we've ever done. The previous record was held by the Jurassic Parktacular, ironically enough, 2 years ago. Seems like every 2 years we just got to shatter some records. We got to do something different. So this episode, the way we were initially going to break it up was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then Solo, Rogue One, 7, 8, 9, and kind of split it as like pre-Disney Star Wars, post-Disney Star Wars. But then as we kind of thought about it, it's like, well, those other two, like, let's just focus on the main Skywalker saga, and we'll come back to those at a later date. So the way we're splitting it up is we're going to do 1 through 6 in this episode and talk about the originals and the prequels. And then next episode, part 2, is going to be all the sequels. 7, 8, 9, that's all we're talking about. We get to do a deep dive, which is so funny because we've never done a deep dive on the podcast about 7, 8, and 9. We talked about The Rise of Skywalker a little bit in our first ever episode together, way back on episode 8. But aside from that, we haven't really talked about it much. And I haven't watched it in 4 years.
I haven't either. See, I've actually seen The Force Awakens 4 or 5 times. Like, I've actually watched that a lot.
That's right. You like that movie.
And then The Last Jedi, I only watch on car trips because it's one of the movies that's... my dad loves cars, and he modded his car to have a little tablet in the front to, like, tell him... to, like, display, like, gauges and stuff. But he also loads movies onto it, and that's one of the movies he's had loaded on there for a long time. And so I've gotten to... So I've seen that one, like, but that was still over a year ago.
Right.
And then I've seen Rise of Skywalker twice. I saw it once in theaters, and then my family watched it on New Year's Eve that next year. And even the second time, I was like, this is dog crap. Like, this sucks. So, it's time to go back, tune in next week. But right now, we're going to talk about some other movies. The good ones. And... Dare I say, just out of the 9 Skywalker saga, Star Wars, I'm sorry, 7 out of the 9 are good.
No, I'm sorry, 6 out of the 9 are good.
I'm just going to say.
Actually, no, I'd also say 9. 7 out of the 9 are good.
But we're talking about a different one for the 7. We'll tune into that next week. Yeah, dare I say 7 out of the 9 are good. That's a really good ratio, especially talking about, like, when we talked about Jurassic Park like 2 years ago, when we were like 1 out of these 6 is good. Like, they need to stop, and then they're making a freaking another one, and then
they're going to be 1 for 7 probably.
So, anyway, you think they're stopping at 7?
No, we didn't think they were stopping at 6.
Here we are. So anyway, we decided after a long debate that we were going to talk about these in release order, talking about 4, 5, 6, and then 1, 2, 3. And I kind of want to just have this conversation first. What is the best way to watch Star Wars? Because I have a very strong opinion on this.
I don't.
Because we watched them in different order.
That's true. I watched them in chronological. You watched them in release order. And I think that... Yeah. I think watching it either way is valid.
Right.
And I think it works that we broke the episode up this way because this kind of argument doesn't really factor into 7, 8, and 9 because they're a sequel to the sequels. Like, you're not going to go watch the prequels after you watch 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and then do 1, 2, 3 because it's not as... I don't want to talk about them too much, but it's not as cohesive as a story. So it doesn't tie together as well as 1 through 6. So I don't know. It depends on who you are. If you're a new person who's never seen Star Wars, I would probably say release order. But if you're someone like us who has already seen them, I don't think it really matters. I think it just depends on where you want to start. I like the prequels, so I started with the prequels. I also wanted to watch... I think if you watch them in that order, it does a really good job of showing Anakin's progression from, like, this kid on Tatooine to this, like, Jedi Padawan who's kind of, like, got these conflicted feelings about romance. And then episode 3 where he, like, goes down that dark path. And then you jump to episode 4. You don't know what's happened in between. in episode 4, you see like, wow, Darth Vader is this really like kind of no nonsense kind of guy, and then like he reunites with Obi-Wan, and that does that, and then Empire Strikes Back, and it's like you can see his progression a lot better when you watch them in release order, because I feel like the moment in episode 5 where he's like, I am your father. But, spoilers for Star Wars, by the way. I thought that was implied. These movies are
but
old.
also like, and I'll touch on this too. Like, Star Wars has transcended
spoilers.
Star Wars. Like, it's like Star Wars is part of the main conscience of society. Like, there's not like there's no Star Wars spoilers anymore, unless you want to get into some deeper lore stuff, but like,
or unless like
everyone
a brand
knows,
new thing comes out, but
right. But so I think I also agree it kind of doesn't matter, because it's the same story either way. It's just where you want to start.
Right.
I watched them in release order. So I started on 4, 5, 6, and then went to 1, 2, 3. And that actually worked out really well, because when we watched 4, 5, 6, it was set up perfectly, and we got to see the Phantom Menace for the theater re-release, which was
that's true.
Really cool. And I'll talk about that later. But I think that I feel like the prequels don't hit near as hard if you don't know what's going to happen. That's kind of like you said, like, if you know what's going to happen, like, you can watch it in chronological order and have no problem. Like, you know exactly what's going to happen, this and that. But for a new person, I feel like Anakin turning into Darth Vader, which is the literal point of the prequels, is to watch Anakin's descent to be Darth Vader,
right,
is... that weight is lost if you don't know who Darth Vader is. I feel like you need to understand what happens in the original trilogy to appreciate what the prequels does so well. Because without that context of what it becomes, the prequels are probably kind of boring to you. And so I feel like what the prequels does really well is tie into the original. And so if you look at them just by themselves, you're probably not going to enjoy it near as much. That's from my personal experience, because growing up when I was little, like, we had them all on DVD. And so I tried to watch the prequels first, and I got so bored. And I was just like, this isn't it for me. But I think with the given context, the prequels thrives even more. That's my opinion. That's how I feel. But TBH, either way, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it doesn't matter. I think something that's also worth mentioning this episode is something I'm trying to do is, and you mentioned this before we started recording, think about the historical context of when these movies came out and disassociate and disattach them from every other surrounding piece of media. Because one of the things I did, like, as I was watching, and this was kind of cool, like, to think about both sides of the coin. The example I'll use is in episode 4, when you see Leia reach out to Obi-Wan for help. The context is a little different if you've seen Kenobi and like, the adventure that they went on. You also realize how much that young actress who played young Leia looks like a young Carrie Fisher.
Oh my gosh.
Like, how
She's
well
phenomenal.
they cast.
Yeah.
Just saying. But the context of that changes, or like Obi-Wan being on Tatooine and kind of like knowing where Luke is at all times. Like, in A New Hope, without the context of Kenobi, or even Revenge of the Sith at the very end, where he's like, hey, I'm going to go watch over Luke. In A New Hope, it's kind of like, where did this old guy come from? Why is he following Luke around? Like, why did he know exactly where Luke was at? But if you add that context in, it's like, oh, well, this makes perfect sense that, like, if he saw Luke was going somewhere by himself, he would follow closely behind just to make sure that he's okay. So, and it is very fitting. I know we'll talk about A New Hope a little bit here in a minute, but I think it's very fitting that Obi-Wan, the last thing he sees is the Skywalker twins reunited, and then that's when he makes peace with being killed by their dad, who's his old apprentice.
Crazy.
Dude,
that's crazy.
it's so good.
There's so much like interwoven. This is why people like Star Wars, because it's just that good. Like, it's that good. And I think historical context is really important for Star Wars. We talked about this a little bit, but just like thinking about when A New Hope, like, we've kind of taken Star Wars for granted in the sense of it's one of the most vast and open and creative fictional worlds we've ever seen in media. But if you think about when A New Hope came out, this was all from scratch.
Yeah, there was no Lucas, whatever.
Like George Lucas started from the ground up. And I really think Star Wars has a staying power, partially because it doesn't have the need to explain everything it does in the original trilogy, where like George Lucas very easily could have fallen into a trap where he was like, well, there's this new like sci-fi world where like no one knows what's going on. And he could very, very easily like dumbed the story down for it to make sense in this world, but he didn't.
Right.
And now it's this huge, expansive thing, and it's so beautiful. And I think you can say what you want about George Lucas. He really was a brilliant creator that was really ahead of his time as a filmmaker too. Just like the way that he created that world from nothing in 1974, like that's insane. 1977. You're right. I'm sorry. I got mixed up.
Gosh. Ugh. And you call yourself a Star Wars fan.
Creating this world from scratch in 1977 was a big deal, and this is historical. Like this is really like a point in time. This is a turning point for movies, and he really pioneered that. And even his like opening credit roll was like a big deal, because if you think about movies from the 50s, 60s, 70s, they all open with credit sequences. So, you know, back in the day, that was the normal for movies, was to watch for 2 to 3 minutes while you watched the credits first. And then you're like, all right, we're gonna get started on this movie. All right, here's the story. So here's the setting, this and that. Nah. George was like, nah, we gotta captivate them from second one. And that's where he hits his ba-da! And that's just his whole Star Wars like word crawl, and you're just like, oh my gosh, what is about to happen?
This isn't the credits we're used to.
This isn't what is this? And then you're like getting all this dialogue from the word crawl, and it's like setting the scene. And you know, we kind of have gone numb to that now because now the movie and like media scene is just a fight for attention, and it really is like, how much can you like keep retention on the audience, and like how do you grasp them in from the first minute, and this and that, where he was like the kind of the pioneer of this, and he like really was like, no, we need to like engage them from second one and give them something to care about at the very beginning. And even like the beginning of A New Hope is that like the second it starts, you're in on the action, and you're just like, whoa, like there's this whole new world, and I'm looking at droids, and like Darth Vader is here, and we're establishing like how powerful he is, like from like the very first scene. And it's just like, what, where am I? Like, it's kind of a shock to the system. But because we've had so much context of other Star Wars, it's so normal to us to just be like, that's Darth Vader, those are stormtroopers, that's C-3PO, he was Anakin's droid, but then he like, Anakin built him this and that, that's R2, he did it. And so like, but just strip away everything, you know. Like, just watch Star Wars thinking about the people in that theater in 1977.
Yeah.
And just been like, that had to have been such an insane experience. And I think that's kind of what I felt on this rewatch, because I haven't really rewatched all these in a long time. But I think I picked up on so many little things this time around that I didn't notice and made me appreciate it so much more. So we can go into it. A New Hope, give me some general thoughts. This is the OG. This is kind of like, started it all. What'd you think?
General thoughts. Wow, what a movie.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to say, I don't know about you, I had to suffer through the remastered versions where they added in all of like that weird CGI.
Stupid
So
CG
I got
crap.
to like this scene with Jabba and I was like, brother, can I turn this off? No. There was no
you know what's
change it back.
Stupid. You know what's stupid is that's the version that they have on Disney Plus. They have
course
the
it is.
freaking remastered, and I'm like, what the frick?
I want to watch the
Why?
original. The original. So there was that. Another thing, I have like some more specific notes. Overall, one thing I want to note is, and I didn't write it down on my notes. Of course I didn't. Oh, wait, yes, I did. I wrote it under Empire Strikes Back, but it rings true for A New Hope. To go back to your point about like hooking people and retention, you don't realize the difference in attention span until you see how little they cut in this movie.
Yes.
Like there's one shot where it's like one continuous shot of Luke getting out of the land speeder, walking over to Obi-Wan and doing something else. And I'm like, I feel like we should have cut like 2 seconds ago and gone to a different angle.
Right.
Like did a punch in, I don't know, do something. No, it was one continuous shot and the shots were long. And like you are forced to focus on this one thing. And you don't realize that like how much nowadays we just cut back and forth because it's like we got to keep it moving. You got to keep the neurons in your brain firing so that you can stay engaged. And it's, I mean, not even the prequels do that. Like,
no,
because the prequels were still mostly shot on film. And I know that's another big difference is nowadays, if you make a cut and it's like the quick cut and you don't like it, you just drag the footage back out over it.
You know?
Back then, you cut that. It was cut. Like, that was the
That's
cut.
why it's called cut. That's why it's called cut.
They were
you
physically
would cut it.
So I know that's part of it is like the difference in technology, and that's why the prequels also didn't do it. I'd also say A New Hope looks really good, and this is why I wanted to turn the remastered off because I don't know how much they remastered outside of like the Jabba scene or like the stuff in the cantina, like
because I watched it on Disney Plus. And they are definitely restored to 4K, which you can restore film pretty easily. Like that's not an issue.
Mine were restored to 4K
that's kind of
too.
That's kind of the beauty of film, but also like Star Wars is some of the most edited media in history. Like George Lucas was making changes on Empire after the theater release. So I mean, TBH, me though. So, and I'll talk about it in a minute when we get there, but like I've seen Empire Strikes Back on Laserdisc, which is probably, they say that that's like the soonest release after theater because Laserdisc was huge then. So that's like the most like unaltered version of Empire. And it looks pretty much the same. It's just obviously lower quality and in a different aspect ratio, but you know.
Yeah, like even the X-Wings and like the Battle of Yavin at the Death Star, like that looked really good for 1977. Like,
yeah,
I was like, dang, it's kind of good.
This is why practical effects will stand the test of time.
Or like the lightsabers when Obi-Wan and Vader had their fight. You do learn to appreciate how far lightsaber choreography has come since then. Even in like 5 and 6. How far a lightsaber like they were just kind of and then like in the new movies they're like flipping it around doing all this stuff, and
we'll come back to this on the prequels.
there is a little like there's a art to the simplicity of like and if you want to get super deep, their fight is so simplistic because at the end of the day they're both old men.
They're so old.
Like, they just don't have the physicality to start jumping around and doing all this stuff. The most physical we see Vader at all in the originals is at the end of 5 and the end of 6. And even then, arguably that's not as much as it should be.
I mean, if you think about the end of 6, he picks up Palpatine and
throws him over.
He also literally dies 10 minutes later.
Yeah, because he got deep fried by that lightning, dog.
So
there's also something to say
probably needed a Tylenol.
It's topical. I'll just say it. At the end of 6, we'll obviously come back to it.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of 6, when you hear his breathing change, you realize his body just can't do a lot. He's inhibited by having a more robotic body outside of his head and his torso. Everything else is mechanical. Even his ability to breathe is mechanical.
Right.
So you realize doing these long, strenuous fights aren't really beneficial
aren't in
for
the cards for him.
Which is why something like Rebels, where he does do a lot more fighting, makes sense, because that, in the timeline of things, is much closer to his fight with Obi-Wan. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like you get to watch Vader digress or decay into this.
Just getting old.
Yeah, he's just getting old. And he can't do all the cool flippy Jedi stuff he did when he was Anakin. And you see him rely a lot more on the Force in stuff like Kenobi, where he stops that ship entirely, which is something that I kind of hate they did in that show. Because there are multiple times in the originals where ships are getting away, where in the back of your mind, you're like, he could just
he could
grab
use the
that,
Force
and that
on
ship's
that.
not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's like, what did you...
And it's just it's kind of, it's kind of the problem with messing with the timeline order, where it's it's kind of bro, we introduced Baby Yoda Force healing so late in the game that we're we could have saved
so many
every
lives.
single Jedi ever. Order
Actually,
66 would have nothing on the child.
Actually, think about it this way. Force healing has always been a thing, but never explicitly, because in episode 3, Palpatine talks about healing people with the Force.
That's true.
Now, granted, it was a dark side, it was implied that it was a dark side thing.
Right.
But Force healing has always been there. So I can't get too mad at the sequels and The Mandalorian for introducing that, because if you follow the logic, it was a dark side thing. The Jedi would not have taught it. Thus, the Jedi would also have never used it. So that being used by any kind of good Jedi person was a new concept. So that was a new concept. But the concept of using the Force to manipulate life and heal things was not. So
you're saying
is interesting.
So you're saying the Jedi is essentially the mom that doesn't let you watch Harry Potter because she thinks it's of the devil. But then later you watch it and you're like, this is fine.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah. I have a lot to say about the Jedi Order, but we'll get back to that.
I think A New Hope, it's a classic, and I think you're onto something here with just the slow pace, and it takes its time. It's not trying to be this huge epic that captivate, because that wasn't a huge deal back then. And by the end it gets really intense and awesome. But I think part of its staying power is it takes its time. It's not catering to an audience with a low attention span because they didn't care. He just wanted to make a good movie. And so and for 77, it looks good. Not even in practical effects, they hold up to this day more than people are that's more of a prequel thing, but it's the CGI in Phantom Menace looks awful, and I'm it looks better than half the stuff Marvel has done for the last 5 years.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
Quit your whining. But it's these practical effects will hold up pretty much forever because it's real. And I'm just like, dude, this is why the overuse of CGI is going to doom us, because we're going to look back at movies from, 2020 and be like, why does it look like that? Like, this isn't natural. It's like, this isn't real. And, that's part of the reason Star Wars connects so much with people, is because it's so real and it's so genuine. And the entire point is hope. It's a new hope. The point is to have hope, like, no matter what. And I'm just like, it's almost like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's almost like when you do a story with some actual good messaging that has like hope, that like makes people care about their characters and think that it's going to be okay, and has actually kind of encouraging, people like it. Now, I may be crazy. Maybe we should just make nihilistic earth-ending garbage for the rest of our lives. But that's all I'm saying. Anyway, maybe the most staying power movies with some of the best staying power of all time are about hope. Fascinating. Anyway,
Good thought.
So yeah, I mean, what else can you say about A New Hope? Like, you can't really dock it for anything.
Nope.
Because it's just like, it's A New Hope. Like, I gave it 5 stars on Letterboxd. Like, what's there to say? Like, it's just, I was going to say it's the GOAT, but I don't think that's true. I think that there's so much historical importance to A New Hope.
Yeah.
That you can't dock it. Like, it's kind of perfect. Like, you could say that it's slow, or like it doesn't make complete sense without full context of the story, but like George knew what he was doing. George was cooking.
Also,
and like
go ahead, finish.
No, I was
okay.
done.
I was just gonna say, wild that George Lucas built an entire trilogy and multiple shows off of one line of Obi-Wan saying, "Oh yeah, I fought with your father in the Clone Wars." I bet you George Lucas didn't know what the Clone Wars was. He was like, it was a war that happened before this. And then built an entire trilogy.
Right.
And a 7-season TV show. And another 3-season TV show.
Dude's cooking. Let him cook.
Off one line. And you're telling me we're creatively bankrupt enough nowadays that we can't figure out what to do without remaking something. Like,
right.
Dude,
get on George's level.
Come on.
Get on George's level.
Also, I think there's something of note that I noticed a lot more going into it this time, of how spiritual the Force actually is.
Mm-hmm.
If you really look at it, you don't even have to look at it hard. Like, it's not like you have to dig through layers of subtext. Literally on the Millennium Falcon, when Luke is doing his training, Han Solo's like, I don't believe in a hokey religion. There's no such thing as like the Force, whatever.
Right.
Textbook atheist behavior. Like, I don't. Your religion is kooky. Like, I'll let you do whatever, but I think it's stupid and dumb. And then, I mean, hey, kind of the whole point of the originals is Han Solo turning from an atheist to the Star Wars equivalent of a Christian. Like, because by the end, he's like, the Force, what can I say?
The Force, bro.
It is what it is.
And you're just like, whoa.
So, like, that element of how the Force is this thing that everyone has, and, like, it binds the whole universe together. Like, Star Wars is, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be, like, a hot take.
Yeah.
I would put Star Wars in the same category of Christian media as, like, Lord of the Rings and Narnia. Because it's overt in what it's trying to tell you, but it's also subvert because it doesn't feel like it's alienating you by like putting that symbolism in there. Mm-hmm. So like I think those are the 3 pillars of like Christian media, if that makes sense.
I think that does make sense, and I agree. The only difference that puts it in a different category than Lord of the Rings or Narnia is intention.
Yes,
so while
that is true.
C.S. Lewis and like made Narnia, he wasn't thinking like, I'm gonna make Aslan as Jesus to do this, this, and that. He was just like, I want to tell a good story and I want to make it like this. Where like, I don't think George Lucas was like, we gotta spread the gospel through Star Wars. Like, Granted, but also like you can spread the gospel in Harry Potter. Like Harry Potter is the gospel's in Harry Potter, and like it's in Star Wars. It's in these places. You just have to look for it, which is so funny. Especially going back to like the Hope thing, is I'm like you don't realize that like the whole like Vader redemption arc is like the Christ story.
Yes.
I'm like you don't get it, and it's so funny. And I'm like,
again. We'll get there, but it's contextually fits.
Get there.
It's literally because if you want to get into the deep lore, Palpatine is Anakin's dad because he like manipulated the midichlorians and like conceived him through the Force. So Palpatine, for all intensive purposes, let's say, is Anakin's dad, right? So it's the son saving someone else by taking on the wrath of the father. Like, it's there. Even without that context. Even, like, let's throw that out. Because we're historical context, the prequels haven't happened yet.
Right.
It's still the same symbolism, and it's the same metaphorical concept of this person being an all-encompassing sacrifice to save you from a punishment that should have gone to you.
Yep.
And it's that, like, embodiment of sacrifice that is what makes it, in essence, like this very hopeful, very, like, Christian-esque story, because the foundation is there. Like, you can say, but Star Wars isn't a Christian story. Okay, the foundation is there, though. Like,
because everything always points back to the ultimate story.
Right. Even if George Lucas wasn't like, how can I spread the gospel through Star Wars? Which I don't think he was, because I think George Lucas is an atheist. I might be wrong, but I wouldn't be shocked if he was.
He's pretty hopeful for an atheist.
I don't know. So, even if you take that out, it's still like, where do you think that concept came from? You could say it came from this, like, Greek epic or whatever. Okay, where did the Greeks get their thing from? Where did this person... And if you track it all the way back, it gets to the Bible. It goes all the way back. So, I'm just saying.
That's
Star
all
Wars,
I'm saying.
Peak fiction.
That's all I'm saying. So, yeah. I think we can slide over to what a lot of people consider the best Star Wars movie.
Oh, one more thing. Slight thing that I noticed. I had to rewind and double check. When they're in the detention block to get Leia is in cell 2187. Which, for those who don't know, that's Finn's stormtrooper number from The Force Awakens. Is FN 2187.
So cool.
And he's the one who breaks out from the First Order after being saved by someone from the Resistance.
That's so
Which
cool.
is such a deep cut. The only reason I noticed is because 2187 has been like my number since the sequels came out. Like my gamer tag is Freaky Ninja 2187, which is also FN 2187.
Right.
So
That's
I heard that sequence of numbers and I was like, hold up. Let me double
Wait a
check.
minute. Something ain't right.
And that's what it was.
That's crazy. So yeah, that's dope. So sliding over to what a lot consider to be the best Star Wars movie, The Empire Strikes Back. TBH, another 5-star. Another 5-star.
So based.
What I will say is this is not my favorite Star Wars movie.
It's not mine either.
Right. It's not my favorite original trilogy movie though.
Yeah, it is my favorite original trilogy movie.
Although
I don't know, A New Hope got pretty close this time around. I was like,
it was good, dude. It was good. And then like The Empire Strikes Back, it's in cinematic history for a reason.
Yeah.
Like, have you seen the theater videos of like Luke or like Vader saying that he's his father? Like,
yeah, and like
insane.
people freaking out.
Yeah.
This was a big deal. If you want to put historical context on any of these three movies, put it on this one. Because there's a lot of things established here. Mm-hmm. One, Battle of Hoth will forever be iconic.
Oh, amen.
The practicality there. of like
the
the AT-ATs being stop motion because they were actually dude, forever iconic.
That's insane. No one will ever take the time to do that now. Like, that's absolutely brilliant.
So there's that, but also, one, it brings in Yoda, who's this like mysterious figure who had never been talked about. It establishes that there is an afterlife for Force users because Obi-Wan comes back as a ghost.
Yep.
Third, when Luke is leaving Dagobah, it sets up that there is at least one more Jedi or one more Hope, which you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense.
This
Who's
is crazy.
that? Luke's the only one.
But it's only him. En contraire.
And then, of course, at the very end, it sets up... Because okay, here's another historical context thing, now that I'm really thinking about it.
Yeah.
The average viewer in Empire Strikes Back did not know that Darth Vader was Anakin Skywalker.
No.
They were presented as two separate characters because Obi-Wan says, oh yeah, Darth Vader killed your dad.
Right.
So thus we've separated them as two different characters. And Obi-Wan says, yeah, Darth Vader was one of my students and your father Anakin was one of my students. So then when Vader comes to him in A New Hope and says, hey, I was the student, but now I'm the master. Like, it's like, oh yeah, he killed the other one and like now.
Right.
Because we also hadn't established the rule of two. So listen.
This goes crazy.
To be in the theater and like Palpatine say, yeah, Anakin Skywalker had a son. And you're like, whoa, he did? Like, that's insane. Maybe Vader's going to kill him too. And now he wants to kill Luke. So like, then when they have that confrontation and Vader's like, no, I am your father. You're like, wait a minute. Hold on.
No,
Vader and Anakin are the same person? Like, it was such a big deal.
Yes.
That was insane.
This is the first. Is this like the first? This is a genuine question. Like, I don't feel like there was like a lore building, like doing like big franchises wasn't like a thing at
not
this
particularly
point in time. Like, you know, there was some, but like not to the level that we have now where like this would be a very normal thing to just like go on to this big reveal. This was like a big deal. Like to go back to the theater 2 years, was it 2 years later? Then, or was it 3 years later? I actually think I have it somewhere.
Empire Strikes Back release date.
It was in 3 years later, so it was 1980.
1980? Oh, okay, that's fair. Man, kicking off the 80s with a... I'm in my head, I'm just thinking about, like, going through all that and thinking about that made me so excited. Like, I don't even know genuinely how I would react as a theater goer seeing that for the first time.
Like, I'm trying to think of, like, the equivalent, because this wasn't even, like, their Infinity War. Like, this, like...
Right, this was movie 2.
Like, this was 2.
And
so
now you're like, how do you follow this up?
I can't even think of a modern equivalent.
Like, the closest they would have had back in the 80s probably would have been the Lord of the Rings books.
Yeah.
But even then, I don't feel like Lord of the Rings had a twist this big.
No, not like that. But also, like, the books had a more of a niche... You know, it wasn't like a pop culture thing, you know?
It wasn't really a pop culture thing until the movies came out.
Right. And so I feel like this really was like the first of its time. Like, this is like a real trailblazing series. That's why we still talk about it. Like that, I don't know. There's like, that's one of the top 3 moments I would travel back in time for. Like, to see that in the theater. That'd be insane.
If I could experience that theater with like all those new people, that would be insane.
Would be crazy.
And what sucks is like,
where'd you get that?
It's the 80s. Imagine wearing like a Rise of Skywalker shirt back to the,
just like,
the 80s. Like, what? Huh? But it's like, I don't know. It would just be so cool.
It would be insane.
Unlike
the
nowadays,
energy in that room was crazy.
Nowadays, like, if you wanted a stupid phone reaction to I'm Rey Skywalker or whatever, there's dozens of videos out there like that. But because it was the 80s, like those videos are so much more rare of theater reaction to I Am Your Father. Like it's just not something that's super well documented, because also people were a lot more respectful in the theater way back when, because it used to be a much bigger deal than nowadays. So that's
yeah.
I feel like that's Empire Strikes Back. Like that's it.
Right.
It's
right.
literally one of the greatest sequels of all time.
Right. And here's my thing. I'll go ahead and say, because we're going to get to it, Return of the Jedi is my favorite original trilogy movie. And I'll tell you why. Because I think Empire does a really great job, and I think the prequels mirror this a little bit. Empire does a really incredible job at setting up Return of the Jedi. So there's a lot of setup happening.
Yes. It's a good midway movie.
It's a really, really where usually like those like three movies, like the middle will be a dip in quality, or like they'll just go on like a random side mission and like figure it out. No, like they're locked in the entire time for Empire. And I think that what Empire sets up is absolutely incredible, and it does that really well. But Return is the payoff of all the incredible things they set up, and that's why I like it better. So that's kind of how I feel.
That's fair.
But yeah, I think Empire's really, 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 really good. It's another 5-star, but it feels really long to me. It's one that, like, I feel like you stay on one pretty consistent plot train for most of the movie. And this is me as a modern audience member, and it's my own problem, and I understand that. I get a little bored for just a little bit, like in the middle. And it was the only time in like the entire original trilogy I was kind of like checking my watch, and I was like, okay, that's probably a really hot take, but I like, if you contrast that to Return, I feel like the stakes of Return of the Jedi are a lot higher than Empire Strikes Back. And I don't know. And I think that Empire has a really good climax at the end, but getting there is kind of hard for me. Like, I love the beginning and I really love the end, but the middle is a little hard for me.
I'm gonna disagree.
Okay.
But not entirely. Like, I understand what you're saying, and I understand where you're coming from, but for me, the only movie where I felt like I was checking my watch out of these 6 was Phantom Menace.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else felt pretty solid.
Yeah.
Like, A New Hope just keeps going. And I didn't realize, like, it moved so fast that in my mind, I thought it was an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I thought it was an hour and a half long movie. No, it's like 2 hours. Yeah. Almost, like, to the dot. And it just keeps going, and everything's very well paced. And A New Hope is interesting because, and I know we'll talk about this with the Phantom Menace, A New Hope doesn't have a B plot at all.
No.
It is.
No, it doesn't.
Well, that's actually not entirely true. The B plot is Leia is trapped on the Death Star, and they're setting up to blow up Alderaan. But it's not a super massive B plot.
It's not. Yeah. It's more of a cutaway.
Yeah.
You know?
It's more of like a, hey, we're going to throw this in there for context, and now back to the A plot.
Right.
But Empire has like A plot, B plot, and it does them very well in tandem, because you're like super invested in what Luke's trying to do, and then you're super invested in like, okay, well, the Millennium Falcon is stuck here, and like that's not working out. So then they got to get to Cloud City, and then they meet Lando, and then they have the exchange, and then Han goes in the Carbonite. Also, I love you. I know.
Iconic.
Iconic.
Bro.
I need
Freaking iconic.
I still have not lived out my lifelong Star Wars fan dream of having a girlfriend or a wife who has the I love you and I have the I know shirt. I was so close. Last relationship, I was so close, but we were never together, like in the same place long enough to get and wear the shirt. And I was like,
I really love. I love that if you just like I'm almost lived out my Star Wars fan dream of having a girlfriend. But and
listen,
I feel like that will be your vows. That will be
don't dog on the nerds, because at the end of the day,
real.
this is like my favorite genre of Instagram reel to see is where the girls are like, where are all the loyal guys? And all the remixes and responses are like,
or dudes with like Lego Star Wars
they're
rooms,
playing with
like
Legos. They're watching Star Wars. They're playing D&D. Like,
right.
The nerds are the loyal guys because they stay committed to something.
You know what's insane is I watched all of these movies with my girlfriend Amy.
Yeah, good for
who
you.
was explained the lore to me the entire time. Like,
Dude,
she knows it
what
way
a
better than I
keeper.
do. And we would be like watching, and then she'd be like, no, never mind. And I was like, what? No, tell me. And she's like, no, I'm just talking through this whole movie. And I was like, no, I want to know. Like, tell me. She's like,
Her and I need to have a lore conversation about Star Wars.
She's like, well, in the book, it actually says that. And I was like, bro, when we were watching the prequels. Actually, when we were watching the prequels, she was like, I mean, it's not really that important, but in the book, it actually says that Padme would keep the throne room like really cold, and it drove Anakin crazy. And I was just like, how do you know this,
man?
Like,
she also likes the Clone Wars, which is very based.
Yeah, she loves the Clone Wars.
It's nice that we can gang up on you now.
She dogs on me for that as much as you do. She's like,
it's not just me.
I would like ask a question. She's like, well, if you watched
the Clone Wars, you would know.
And I was like, no, please. So anyway, that's
Empire Strikes Back.
I don't know. Empire, phenomenal. Even like Cloud City is a vibe. It's a whole vibe. You know,
all I could think of was the Battlefront 2 map.
No, for real, dude. Freaking like, oh my gosh. Dude.
Even the music, because like that was the music that they play on the loading screen. I was like,
yes,
oh, we're playing Battlefront?
Dude.
Okay.
And then like Lando Calrissian, who is just a pimp, by the way. Like, he is straight up like. Anyway, which makes me so pissed how they like massacred him in the sequels. Anyway, that's another conversation.
You mean the one movie he was in?
The one, right?
For like half the
didn't
movie?
need to be there. He didn't need to be there. Like, what? Why did we bring him back anyway?
Because Han was dead,
and there
and
is
we need someone
really,
to fly the Millennium Falcon.
Cloud City is really iconic. I appreciate that. But like, it's just. For whatever reason, and I've always felt really weird about it, but like Empire doesn't hit for me the way that it hits for other people. And I don't know why. I can't explain it.
That's fair. I don't have much more to say about it other than, I mean, it's just...
I don't either. Like, what else do you say other than like...
We're an hour in and we're like, I'm like, we don't have much to say about the originals.
Just,
we're an hour in and we haven't even gotten to the prequels yet.
No, for real. And it's like... Dude, I mean, what else can I say about Empire other than like iconic? It's not my favorite, and I can't really pinpoint why. It doesn't hit for me as hard as Return does, and I don't know why. But I think Return of the Jedi for me is just one of the greatest on-screen redemption stories coming to fruition, especially after watching the prequels and like that whole thing and him coming back. And also like there's so much good, incredible storytelling about like the Emperor, like they were hiding Luke and Leia, not even from Vader. They were hiding them from the Emperor because the Emperor knew that he would have to kill them if Darth Vader was going to stay Darth Vader.
Yes, because
like,
it was the only thing...
The only thing that would turn him back to the light side would be his children.
Dude.
Which is beautiful. That's beautiful.
Which, if you really think about it, his children are the last remaining remnants
connection
of Padme.
Right to his right.
So it is so fitting that they would be the only thing to bring him back to the light because they were the very thing that drove him towards the dark in the first place.
It's just beautiful. It's a beautiful story arc, and seeing it come full circle is so satisfying for me.
Something that makes it even
it's
better.
Beautiful.
And I'll come back to it when we get to Revenge of the Sith. But
You do that while I swap out my battery.
Emotional manipulation that comes in for Anakin the second he becomes Darth Vader. Like, Palpatine wastes no time getting in on that emotional manipulation, because as soon as he like wakes up, his first thought is, hey, where's Padme at? Is she okay? Like, it's almost kind of like the whole fight with Obi-Wan was very humbling, and had Obi-Wan taken him instead of Palpatine, he probably would have come to his senses and been like, oh, okay, like, is she okay? I know I did something wrong there. And Palpatine's like,
you killed her.
I think she's dead.
Dude,
he lost it. And that was it. Because he assumed that in killing his kids, or in killing Padme, he killed his kid. So therefore, everything was dead. Like, there was no Padme, there was no kid, there was nothing. So he's like this broken man in a robot suit.
Dude.
And he's emotionally distraught. So then he just kind of slips into this like evil Vader persona with no emotion, which then, to tie it into Return of the Jedi, Luke is the only reason he did not win that fight. If it was anyone else, he would have won, but he didn't want to kill Luke because it was his son.
Yep.
Which is exactly what Palpatine didn't want, which is why, if you notice, halfway through the fight, he just pivots entirely and starts talking to Luke, not Vader. Or really, not even pivots halfway through the fight. The whole time. Once Vader brings Luke up there, he's like, I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk to you. Because if I can switch you, it doesn't really matter what happens to
then
Vader.
We win.
Because you're stronger than Vader anyway. So it's like this... Dude, Palpatine has destroyed the Skywalker family. And it is such a good story.
It's such a good story. Like, just... It all comes back to, like, this is just a great story. Like, overall. And I think... I also really love Return just because, like, the Endor scene is really just so, like, the aesthetic is incredible. I will always harp on this, and I always have. Their outfits on Endor go crazy. Like, their whole, like, that was my favorite Battlefront skin, was their Endor versions. And, you know, I love Ewoks. I think they're iconic. I mean, just the whole final fight, like, it just caps off so well that it's just like, dang, like, it's phenomenal. And even think about, like, going back to historical context, after Return of the Jedi, that was it.
That was it.
Like,
you were done.
That was it. You were done. You're like, oh, all right, cool. Like, that's what we're doing until 1999 when we did the Phantom Menace. And then even then that was different. And you were like, oh, I don't know. This is a big deal. And also, like, I don't know. What else do you say? Like, the opening, like, Jabba the Hutt, like fight is so good. The Rancor is awesome, and, like, all this together. And then if you watch the remastered version, you get the greatest musical sequence of all time with that freaking, like, anteater looking lady, which is just like, they're just like, what? Why
I
do you
feel like
need to add this?
I feel like the original trilogy movie that got murdered the most with the remasters was Return of the Jedi.
No, you're right.
Because they added
you're
that.
Very right.
But also, I don't know if you picked up on this. At the end, after the second Death Star explodes, they added more celebration scenes. They added
they did.
Naboo,
They added Naboo,
Coruscant, and I don't remember what the third one was. But it was
There
like
was a third
another
one,
movie
though.
that was relevant
Right.
to the prequel. I think it was Tatooine.
Right.
Maybe not. But they added a third
They added
one
more.
in there. They were all ones, like, they were this exact same CG layouts that they used for the prequels.
Yeah.
Because
And
they
it's just like,
remastered
bro.
these right when the prequels came out. And it's
And it's
so
just like,
frustrating because
why?
that wasn't there originally.
Right. And it's like, why? What's the point? How
Because
do I
historical
watch this?
context, Naboo and Coruscant mean nothing to you if you just watch the originals. Because you don't even know
Right.
those planets exist.
Right.
So the only
So
reason
you're
they
like-
make sense is if you
you're like-
watched 1, 2, and 3.
Which is so frustrating because it's like it's pushing you to watch them in the chronological order, which I don't like. And it's just like, it's so frustrating. Anyway, the only change in the remaster that I actually think added something was having the Hayden Christensen ghost.
I disagree.
Really?
I disagree. I don't like that.
I
because
think it actually added.
I don't. Because, and I know the argument is like, well, it's the ghost from when Anakin Skywalker died. And it's like, okay, but if you prescribe to the theory that there was always light in Vader and there was always good in him, then Anakin was never truly dead. So therefore, because Anakin would have come back at the end to save his son and kill Palpatine and find out that he had a daughter, by the way. I'm going to come back to that in a second.
Yeah.
Found out that he had these 2 kids, and then he died peaceably and let himself go. So I prescribe to that theory that Anakin was never truly dead because he was always, like, there was always just a little bit
Right. There's a little
in
bit
there,
of light
like
in him.
way deep down. There was just this tiny little bit.
Right.
Because if Anakin was truly dead, there never would have been a redemption in the first place. Because if Anakin was truly gone and like zeroed out, there is no light, no hope, no nothing that can bring him back. So there has to be just this teeny little bit that it still has to be there. Which is
but wouldn't-
why you would then use the David Prowse Force Ghost.
Yeah. I don't know. I just still I feel like he shifts to a different character when he becomes Vader, and he really like letting it be the Anakin ghost. I feel like humanizes him in a way that reminds you how far he's come. And, like, he's back to the light now. Like, he's okay. Like, it's Anakin. Like, he's going to be okay. You know?
No.
No. No.
I still don't. Because it was Anakin's physical body the whole time.
Right.
Like,
But-
even if you tie it into a spiritual thing, right?
Yeah.
Why was his Force Ghost not visible? If Anakin was dead, why was his Force Ghost not visible before? Why did it take Darth Vader dying for his Force Ghost to then appear? It doesn't
Because
make
he
any
was on
sense.
the dark side then. He was on the dark side then.
Right.
But now he's
so
on the
then
light
why
side.
wouldn't it be the ghost of when he died? It was the ghost of when everyone else died.
No, but because he went back to the light side. It was his, like, Force ghost.
Right.
Because he's not going to
So
put, like...
you would take the body and the image from when he was on the light side last, which would have been right before he
No.
died.
No. I don't know.
Add this to the list of Nerdiest
Add this to the
podcast
list of
disagreements.
things we disagree on. we need to actually make a long list. Of
I'm gonna make a
everything we've
list
ever
right
disagreed
now.
on. So that's that about that. That's your original trilogy.
Oh, wait.
Man.
We missed like
One more
one
thing.
major thing.
Oh.
Luke and Leia are siblings, by the way.
Oh yeah. By
That
the way,
was
Luke and Leia are
wild.
siblings.
I also think it's
and it
wild
makes-
that George
You're gonna
Lucas.
talk about her.
Listen, A New Hope gets a pass.
George.
Here's the question of the
Buddy.
day: is it incest if you don't know? Answer honestly. I would say no. It's all about intention.
What the?
Because-
no, it's still
no.
absolutely
Stop.
is.
Let me explain. In this case,
No.
I'm going to say no because they didn't know. But once they did know, that behavior went away. That's the big tell.
No.
That's the big tell.
No, it's not. No.
I'm
No,
saying from
you're
their
wrong.
point of view,
No.
it's passable
It's
with air
still-
quotes.
No.
But what makes it
No.
worse? What makes it worse is that in writing Empire Strikes Back, George Lucas knew at the end
He knew.
that he was going to make them siblings, right? And then just like at the beginning, because he kind of has to stay in character
Yeah.
and can't break that character at all, they have to have like that massive kiss at the beginning of Empire
Yeah.
to then later on in the movie imply that they would be siblings and then confirm it in Return of the Jedi, which is given in that scene of like between Han and Leia where he's like, okay, well, you're into him. Okay, I'll step off. And she's like, no,
Right.
he's my brother.
He's my brother.
And Han's
he's
like-
just like, that face that he makes in that movie
so
is maybe
stupid.
the funniest Star Wars moment ever. Like,
It's
just
like he got the
Harrison
green
Ford's-
light. He's like, yeah.
yeah. So, no, it's still, even if it's unintentional incest, it's still incest.
I don't know,
I don't. There's no way around.
I'm
that.
gonna add that to the
really,
list.
I really.
I'm not defending incest in any way, shape,
Sounds
or
like you're
form.
defending it a
I'm
little
not.
bit. Sounds like you're defending it a little bit.
I'm just
you're
saying-
justifying, even if we didn't know.
It's
not
the
in
only way to
theory,
justify
even if you
it and
didn't-
make the movie watchable.
Even if you didn't know, like, would it be though? Like, no, it's still.
Interesting.
He's still kissing his sister. Like, he didn't. Like, it makes sense because he was like, the whole point was just to do like a fake love triangle because it's not really a love triangle. Han is just arrogant and like is challenged by Luke, who like.
Who's kind of
Leia, like-
indifferent about it, honestly, the whole time.
Right, TBH. And but like then at the end of Empire, she's like, I love you. He's like, I know. But in like inside, he's flipping out. Like it's all like a tough guy act. So which we see more in the sequels, which anyway, that's another conversation. Divorcing Luke or Han and Leia was like the dumbest thing. ever.
What's on our
Anyway,
list of disagreements? La La Land, No
La
Way
La
Home.
Land, No Way Home,
Barbie?
Sword Art Online, Barbie, Sword Art Online, incest.
Progressive, specifically.
Yeah.
David.
Anakin Force Ghost.
Yeah, you're right. Anakin Force Ghost and incest, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm not putting that on there.
You
We're
need to
on the
write it-
same
you need
page.
to write it like the
I
incest,
just
I guess.
This is one of those like
I really did not like that conversation. So an hour and 20 minutes in, I think we should talk about the prequels.
I think you're right.
Before we do that, we're gonna throw it over to our sponsor. What? That's crazy.
forgot
This is a
about that.
sponsor. Well, our sponsor is us. That's right. So we sponsor our own thing. This is all kind of an indie production. We do everything. We do all the planning, editing, film, everything. All the promo is all us. So we really just appreciate your support. If you want to leave 5 stars for on your favorite podcast platform, whether it's Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, or Pandora, or Amazon, wherever you at, give us 5 stars. We'd love to hear from you. And there should be a question in the description down below. if you're
poll
on
of the
Spotify.
week.
So
Is it incest if you don't know?
no, stop. No, that can't be the poll.
So out of context, too.
So, yeah, make sure you do that. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at The Nerdiest Podcast, on YouTube at The Nerdiest Podcast, and go to thenerdiestpodcast.com for your very own Nerdiest Podcast merch, where we have shirts, hats, and mugs, and
buttons.
pins, and magnets,
Pins,
and
you're
all this
right.
stuff. So, thank you so much for supporting the show. We really appreciate it. Now, the prequel trilogy, TBH.
Ain't that
I
bad?
haven't seen them in forever. I haven't seen it in forever. And I'll be honest, I have actually a confession that I need to get off my chest at this point.
Okay.
I used to hate the prequels because it was cool. It used to be so cool to hate the prequels. And it used to be so hip to talk about how terrible the writing was and how cringe it is and this and that. But going back through, they're really not that bad. they're really not that bad. They're really cohesive. They work really well as a political drama. They tie into the original trilogy really well. The actors, there are some cringe moments, but it's not the actor's fault. It's just the really, really kind of weird writing. And I think it's more in Attack of the Clones is really where that's the most prevalent, just in Anakin being kind of generally a creep. But also he's a 15-year-old that is like
in which
really
movie? He's 19 in Attack of the Clones.
Oh, sorry. He's like 19 and has been like
because it's a
pretty much
10-year time jump.
isolated from the world, and he's been thinking about the same girl for like 10 years. So like he's going to have some homeschooled energy. So like give him some grace on that one. Let's be real.
Qui-Gon Jinn would have homeschooled Anakin, not sent him to the public Jedi Academy.
Let's be real. Anyway, I feel like I treated the prequels too harshly in my high school days, and maybe even on this podcast, and I'd like to apologize.
Yeah, you used to talk about how much you hated Phantom Menace. How
it
was a sandwich, and if your whole sandwich tastes bad except for the last bite, it doesn't matter. It's still a bad sandwich. That was like the specific analogy you used for Phantom Menace.
Yeah, no, you're right. I've seen the error of my ways.
Good
and
for
I
you.
think here's the thing. The Phantom Menace is probably the weakest of the three, but it's necessary to set up the other ones. And so I think that the prequels is like like a chart going up. Like they just get better as you keep going. And so give me some general thoughts, like prequels in general, but also like Phantom Menace. Like, give me that history.
Prequels in general, I think people hate I think people don't like the prequels because of the political stuff, but I think the political stuff is what makes it interesting because it's real world politics dressed in a much more interesting and easy to understand way. Like there was a lot of stuff during the prequels where I watched it and I was like, oh, that's exactly what's going on in the real world. Like Star Wars is telling us where we're headed, but we're not making the correlation because we're like, oh, this is a fictional world. Like that would never happen in real life. Like a nobody senator from a small town would never slowly connive and make their way up to the highest position of power and then give themselves like all this power that would make them a supreme dictator or anything. Like that would never happen in real life.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that, but there's also a lot to say about the politics are necessary because they're on the precipice of a war.
Right.
Like that's what happens.
For real.
The difference.
It's Star Wars.
Yeah.
Wars.
The difference in like between the originals and the prequels is the originals, they're in that war, but they're not necessarily in a war. It's a rebellion against the Empire. So like you don't really need the political side there because the politicians aren't on the side of the rebels. That's the thing. So like the political dialogue isn't as important there. Here you're like, okay, you have the Republic and the Separatists. The Separatists want to do all these things, which is violating all these laws.
Right.
So maybe we should have like, there is a diplomatic solution. And that's kind of where Padme comes in as a character of like, she's the one who is consistently like, hey, there's a diplomatic solution for any of this. Which is also something that Leia picks up.
Ding, 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 ding.
In being a diplomat.
See?
But she also has that kind of fiery spirit from Anakin where she's like, you know what? Fine. I'm going to kill some people. So it's like the way dude, it's just so good. The way the Skywalker twins like parallel each other and how like 3PO is always with Leia, just how he was always with Padme.
Right,
R2 is always with Luke.
Dude.
Like how R2 was always with Anakin. And the reason that was because, I don't know if you know this, but in the wedding scene in Attack of the Clones, they don't exchange wedding rings, they exchange droids. R2 was always with Padme.
This is homeschooled.
Before Attack of the Clones. And 3PO was Anakin's droid that he built. And then when
Aw.
they got married, they switched, which would also be apparent if you watch the Clone Wars, because 3PO
Sorry.
is always around Padme in the Clone Wars, and R2 is always with Anakin. So it's like their
Listen.
droids swapped because they couldn't swap wedding rings because there was no way for that to be public. 'Cause
Me
they
at
had to
my
keep it
wedding
secret.
swapping Galaxy's Edge droids instead.
Can you do that, please? Can you,
Oh my god!
just you
I
have
don't
like
a
not a
Galaxy's
ring
Edge
bearer,
droid. I
you
need
have
to
a
get
droid
one.
carrier who like carries the droids
Well,
up
you
to the
just
front.
well, you just do someone with the control in the back, and they drive it down the aisle.
But yeah,
Oh my
Phantom
gosh.
Menace.
Yeah, Phantom Menace.
It's fine. I think its
It's
biggest
fine.
struggle is that it doesn't have a B plot. And I know we
Right.
talked about this a couple weeks ago off the podcast.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
struggles from not having anything to cut away to. And the only
Right.
time
So
it
they're in
has
the
something to
desert
cut
for,
away
like, an
to
hour.
is like, oh, Obi-Wan's on the ship. He's pushing buttons. All right, back
Yeah.
to the main thing.
Back to the desert, and you're like,
And that's it.
okay. And see, I saw this in theaters, which was infinitely helped the experience, TBH. Because I was like, I'm in a comfortable seat. I got my popcorn. Like, this is lit. The soundtrack is bumping on these speakers. This is lit. I'm in. What an ideal Saturday afternoon. But I agree. I think that the Phantom Menace opens pretty strong. And you're like, oh, the Jedi, this is cool. Which also, talking about historical context, this is the first time we've seen the Jedi be actually cool. You know, like in the original trilogy, the Jedi are cool, and especially in Return, like you get some cool flippy stuff and some lightsaber stuff. But like at the end of the day, like in the original trilogy, the Jedi are very stoic. They're very like honorable, like they're very this and that. But in the prequels trilogy, the Jedi are like really awesome. They're like boss.
Cap.
And so I think on what
Continue.
front?
I'll get
On
to
what
it.
front?
I'll get to it. It comes up more in
No.
Attack
Oh
of the
my
Clones
gosh.
than anything else.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, you know, the Jedi are really cool in this movie. And I think that like it starts off pretty well and we're like, okay, I'm getting into this. And then we crash on the desert and we're there for like
An
an
hour.
And it's just like, oh my gosh, get off this planet. And I understand because they're like setting up the whole Anakin thing, which is like
Important.
the point. That's the point. But I'm also like, bro, this is boring.
We did not need
So,
the pod race to be like a whole thing.
no.
But the problem
And then
is,
even
I feel like if you cut down some of the stuff and made it like a montage, people will be upset that you didn't flesh it out.
right. It doesn't need to be cut. It needs something to cut back to. You know, you
Right.
need to just kind of you need something else going on with it. And it was really during the pod race that we were watching and I was like, I think this is why people talk about how boring this movie is. Because the pod race is one, it's really long, but it's also like it's just kind of the pod race. You know, they're just kind of going in circles and you're like, well, wow, this is awesome. Like I get to watch CGI pods go in circles for 15 minutes. Like it's long. And then here's what I'll say. This is maybe one of my hottest takes of the year.
Uh-oh.
You guys want to come after and be like, oh, the Phantom Menace is so boring. It's just in the desert for so long. And then go watch Dune
True.
and
True.
praise it
True.
like it's
True.
the next
True.
best thing since sliced bread. All right, that's all I'm saying. Oh,
It's kinda cooking there.
Anyway.
And Dune is
don't
just
come to
sand and
me-
political dialogue, so don't
Right, that's what I'm saying. So
don't
what's
come
wrong
at me
with the Phantom Menace?
for
Don't
not
come at
liking
me.
Dune. Okay,
And it's like twice the freaking length of the Phantom Menace,
True.
okay? And then they're like, oh, this is peak fiction. The Phantom Menace is so boring. Anyway,
this is so valid.
I ended up giving the Phantom Menace like 3.5 stars on Letterboxd throughout this run because I was like, it's not 4-star worthy, but there's some really good parts. Like, I'd like to. I'm gonna apologize for my sandwich analogy that I made like 5 years ago, and like you know, the middle is boring, but the Duel of Fates, especially in the theater, goes crazy. It goes
Dude.
crazy. And it's still one of the best lightsaber fights in like Star Wars ever. And you know, like just them together and then like honestly Qui-Gon is kind of a jerk. Like, he really was like, I'm going to raise this kid. And then all the other Jedi were like, no, I really don't think you should. And he was like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And then he dies, and he's like, Obi-Wan, you have to do it. You have to do it. And it's like, dude, why did Qui-Gon, like, doom everybody?
No, Qui-Gon's kind of based.
Like,
actually.
I mean,
I'm going to come out in defense of Qui-Gon here. He knew exactly what he was doing.
see, here's the thing.
Because
He did. Because it all, like it was the whole, it was kind of like the canon event, you know?
Yeah, he
Like-
had to die.
Like, he knew what the canon events were going to be, but you know,
He
it's
watched
still
the
just
original
like,
trilogy.
guys, I don't understand why they didn't know he was Darth Vader when they could have just gone and watched the original trilogy and known that Anakin Skywalker. That's a plot hole that old Georgie boy didn't think about. But I guess I'm just better than everyone. So yeah, Phantom Menace, not amazing. Kind of slow in the middle. Gets a little boring.
Kind of slow. Something I really have to do, especially during this section of the episode, is disattach the prequels from the Clone Wars, which is so hard to do because the Clone Wars exponentially makes the prequels so much better. Like, I'm not even kidding. The Clone Wars elevates what was before one of the most, like, I would say mediocre Star Wars trilogies to one of the greatest cinematic experiences of all time.
Yeah.
Because the Clone Wars found that balance between the political dialogue of, like, being in war, like wartime political dissidents, but also actually showing the war. Because that is the one downside of the prequels is we skip from episode 2 at the beginning of the war to episode 3 at the end of the war. Right. So everything in between, you're kind of like, yeah, there was a war that happened there, but we didn't get to see the Star Wars. So the Clone Wars kind of filled that gap in a great way. So I'm trying to
disassociate that.
Historical context.
Yeah.
We're going to take the Clone Wars and just chuck it
Think
over.
about that.
Which is hard because it's my favorite show of all time. Favorite piece of Star Wars media.
Talk to me about Jar Jar Binks.
Dude, okay. I think Jar Jar Binks is fine.
I really don't mind Jar Jar Binks. Like, what's the problem? He's just silly. Like,
gonna get mad at Jar Jar Binks for being comedic relief, then I'm sorry, we have to cut out R2-D2 and C-3PO from the original trilogy.
Been in. Right.
Like,
right.
Also, Jar Jar's only in episode 1.
Right.
He never... I don't want to say he never comes back because he's partly in episode 2. He's the reason... Things escalate the way they do, by the way, in episode 2.
Also, I ascribe to the Darth Jar Jar theory. I think he was a Sith Lord the entire time. I wholeheartedly, unironically believe that.
Okay. That's
Are you
fair.
adding that to the disagreement list?
No, because we're not going to fight over it. I just don't agree.
Okay.
I'll hash it up for the meme. Like, I think for the meme, it's funny.
Here's the thing, though. Darth Jar Jar is the clearest explanation of why he exists.
No,
like
he's just a
silly guy.
He's the Star Wars equivalent of a hillbilly who gets transported to the highest levels of Congress. He's also a nobody from Naboo who becomes a senator who amasses political power. He's actually just a shadow of Palpatine.
Have you seen that video? I don't know if I sent it to you last night of the guy that goes in front of the court and he's like, "What up, court?"
I've seen those videos.
And he's like, "I've been really playing a lot of Call of Duty with my boys, and let me tell you."
I love that video so much.
That's so good. Yeah, that's Jar Jar. Like, that is, yeah. I don't think he's that bad. I've never thought he was that bad. I don't really
have
care.
much more to say about
Phantom
Menace.
Phantom,
it's okay.
It's okay. The end is really, really good, and it sets up the rest really good. But it is really different from the other two movies of the trilogy. Like, it kind of stands on its own, and then the other two are like really cohesive. So I don't know, but Attack of the Clones, though.
More like Attack of the teenage repressed romantic feelings from Anakin
this
Skywalker.
movie, bro,
Dude,
movie
he's
is
such a
so
simp.
freaking horny. This movie is
Why
so
is
horny.
he so... Dude, it's so bad.
Bro, literally, we were cackling at this movie.
It's
like,
so hard to
people-
defend.
Like, we were at my house here, and we went downstairs to get something, and my dad was like, "What are you guys watching?" And I was like, "Star Wars." And he's like, "And you're laughing that hard at Star Wars?"
Dude.
Because what got me the most was so funny when like the freaking like worm pooping robot like sticks the gross little centipede in her room, and Obi-Wan's like, "What are you doing? Why aren't you watching cameras?" He's like, she turned the cameras off. I don't think she liked me watching her." And I was just like, what the actual heck? Like, whoa.
But then he's like using the Force to sense her the whole time.
Right. And I'm like, bro, one, this is where you realize how incredibly Force sensitive he is. He is like so painfully Force sensitive that it's insane.
Like, almost to the extent of it's effortless.
Right.
Like, he just has so much Force energy
right
that he can effortlessly, like, maintain a conversation with Obi-Wan
while
and
like
immediately
feeling,
pick up
yeah,
that there's something off in the room.
right.
Like, before Obi-Wan
So it's
did.
like, I think Anakin is the epitome of the overachiever child / burnt out adult.
Burnout gifted kid.
The burnt out gifted kid. He is the epitome.
I think there's something interesting to say that it almost feels like no one tried to curb this behavior out of him.
No, they were like, go for it.
For the
like,
Jedi
bro,
Order,
what?
who's like no attachments, no nothing. No one like sat down and had a conversation with him. They
was
just
like,
for
dude.
10 years let him
Like, just
build
let him-
up this repressed sexual energy towards Padme Amidala for no reason. And then they're like,
Yeah.
huh.
That's
Maybe.
fascinating.
And then, despite them knowing this, by the way, there's no way they're not conscious of it.
Oh, they know.
They send him alone with her. Why?
Bro.
Why?
They literally were like,
They
oh my
set
God.
him up for failure. And
Dude,
then
literally-
get mad when it leads to the downfall of the Jedi Order.
The entire like prequel trilogy is just the Deadeye. Not the Deadeye.
The Deadeye, yeah, they are
rude.
dead.
That's rude. The Jedi just being idiots,
Prideful and shooting themselves in the foot.
just being prideful pricks that think they know everything, and then it just ends up being the doom. And you know, pride comes before the fall, guys.
Yeah.
So you know, the Jedi Order is so incompetent in this thing, and it's so good. Like, it's really, really good storytelling of like, they thought that they had it all together and they were like really full of themselves, and it led to their downfall. You know, like that's actually like really solid storytelling. Like, you know, they're not perfect characters, and you know, that's awesome. And I will say Attack of the Clones feels kind of long, but I also think that it takes a minute to get going.
I would
like
disagree.
it's a lot of like the first hour is a little slow, and then I'm fully locked in. But you know, I also I had another point. I also think the prequels, and this is what I think a lot of people are talking about when they comment on the writing of the prequels. The prequel movies something will happen, and they'll be like, oh, they'll have a political dialogue conversation, and then you do an iMovie wipe transition, and then immediately being a reaction to what just happened. It'll be like, they'll be sitting down and being like, oh, he's like, Anakin, I have this assignment for you. You need to watch Chancellor Palpatine, and you need to do this and that. And they have this dialogue, and then it's immediate wipe cut to Obi-Wan on the ship talking about like, oh, I don't think Anakin liked
I don't think he's gonna like
his-
this.
I don't think he liked that assignment, this and that. And it does that a lot. It kind of just like, the pacing is a little more unique, and I don't really hate it. I really don't feel like it took away from the movie at all, but I understood why people feel that way.
Right.
It just didn't bother me as much as other people this time around. I was like, this is really solid political drama. And I think you just need to be a mature enough adult to care and to follow. Like when I was a kid, I didn't like the prequels because I didn't understand the politics.
Right.
Like I feel like the prequel trilogy deals with a lot more adult feelings, and maybe just as when I was younger, I just didn't understand. And honestly, that's on me. Like, that actually makes it a really solid and mature story.
Right.
And I really, really appreciate that this time around. And Attack of the Clones hits on that, especially like 19-year-old Anakin being dumb. It's kind of relatable. Like, I'm like, think back to my like early, like mid high school days, and I'm just like, I was an idiot. I said stupid crap like that. And my favorite line in the entire prequel trilogy, I think it's so funny, is when he's just like, and it's not, I don't like sand. That's low-hanging fruit. Everyone memes that to no end. It's when he's like, looks her dead in the eye, and he's like, I'm haunted by the kiss that you should have never given me. And
Like,
I'm
bro,
just
you
like,
initiated it. What are you talking about?
like, what do you,
You started leaning first.
You kissed her, and then
She was like, no, we shouldn't have done that. And then he like flips it on her. What an emotional gaslighter. I also think, as I've thought about it over the last 5 minutes, I think a lot of the reason, and this ultimately is part of the downfall of the Jedi Order, is the reason they don't. The reason Anakin got this bad is because they didn't try to curb anything. It's not that they saw it and were like, we're not going to do anything. They just don't do anything. They teach
right. They didn't
absolutism in the sense of you should care for people from a distance. Like, you should care enough to want to save and protect life, but you shouldn't have any emotional attachments to anyone because you need to be able to let them go at a moment's notice.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the problem was, over that 10 years, Anakin was already a very emotional person before doing the Jedi stuff. Like, he obviously didn't want to leave his mom, didn't want to, leave all this uncomfortableness. By the way, slight side tangent, I forgot to mention this in Return of the Jedi. Anakin's kid is the one who chokes out and kills the largest slaver on the planet of Tatooine.
Oh,
after
that's
he
baller, actually.
started
That's
as a
baller.
slave, went off, had these kids, who then turn around and kill the largest slaver on Tatooine. Full circle moment, by the way. Anyway,
That's baller.
he has all of this like intense emotional energy that he doesn't know what to do with.
Right.
Couple that with the Jedi training that then doesn't give you an outlet for it. They don't teach. This is going to sound so dumb, but just follow me here. They don't teach you how to properly talk to women. So when he is then confronted with alone time with this woman that he has intense emotional feelings for, that's why it's so cringe, because mentally he's not 19. He's like 15.
Yeah.
So up here, this is all normal. And he's just kind of spewing out the emotional thought. He was never taught how to like, okay, Anakin, you can't walk up to a woman and say like, we can hide it.
You're just as beautiful as the last time I saw. Or she's like,
brother,
Mayani, how you've grown, and he's like, you haven't changed one bit. And we're just like, what the?
Like, he was never taught how to repress.
This is what I mean.
Or do anything.
Bro had bad homeschool syndrome.
Yes,
like,
they separated him from society. And
he was
then,
the bad homeschoolers, you know?
Which I think also ties into why Yoda said he was too old. Because initially in Phantom Menace, he said he's too old. And if you want to think about it from the twisted way, it's because he was too old for them to beat that out of. Yeah. Because if you think about all of the other good Jedi, tricks. Like Ahsoka was an infant when she got drafted into the Jedi military.
We think of all the other Padawans.
Obi-Wan was basically also an infant. Like 5 and below. 5 Below, my favorite store, is where all the Jedi
Which is the
shop.
sponsor of today's episode.
But then Anakin was 9, so he was way past that threshold, and that's
Already
why
matured.
they're like, we can't
train him.
We can't curb this out of him because he's too old. That emotion is set in stone. So then you get 10 years later, and now you have this emotional kid who's like, over here, he's emotionally conflicted and driven by emotion.
Right.
But then over here, he's like taught that you should not have emotion and that you should be very like conflicting. And I think that's why it would have been better if Qui-Gon trained him, because Qui-Gon kind of learned how to manage both sides of that.
Yeah.
And I mean, you even see it in Obi-Wan. If you watch the Clone Wars,
oh my god,
you would know. No, seriously, you would know that Obi-Wan could relate to Anakin more than anyone else, because Obi-Wan absolutely had romantic feelings for the Duchess Satine, and he couldn't do anything, but he learned how to control that. So that's, I think, why...
Bro was the ultimate self-control.
Yeah, he learned how to figure that out and control it. But then he didn't help Anakin with it at all.
Which
and
is
I
so
think
frustrating.
that was like
bro.
living vicariously through Anakin, and that was like one of Obi-Wan's biggest pitfalls.
That's
was just kind of
hard.
letting it go.
That's really hard.
Because Obi-Wan's not even shocked in episode 3 when he's like, Anakin's the father,
he's
isn't
like,
he?
Is Anakin the father?
And she's like, and he's like,
but then
yeah,
he's
that
like,
checks out. I'm not
so
shocked.
sorry. I really love when he says that in Revenge of the Sith. He's like, Anakin's the father, isn't he? And she's like, and he says, I'm so sorry, and he has to leave because he knows he's taking responsibility.
He's like, yeah,
for that.
I
And he's
shouldn't
like,
have let this go. I
yeah.
should have just.
This one of those like post-game interviews where he's like, hindsight's 2020.
I'm so sorry. I should have let that happen.
I'm sorry. I should have.
Which I think is also why he feels
I should have
guilty.
castrated him at the.
And then, like, actually, that is a great point. Why doesn't the Jedi Order adopt castration? Like, if you're not supposed to have any emotional attachment, why not just? I'm not saying you should by any
I'm not
means.
saying. You're justifying a lot of really whack stuff
I'm just
in this
saying,
episode.
why did the Jedi Order never consider that? Like, they have enough humanity to not castrate people, but then in the same breath will tell you not to go have romantic relations at all? I'm just saying the math don't math. Anyway.
You're justifying a lot of really weird stuff.
Which
in
I
this
think is
episode.
why Obi-Wan feels guilty and thus goes to take care of Luke, because he's kind of like bearing the responsibility of letting Anakin go down that path, and also like murdering his dad.
Right.
So like, if you're gonna take the father figure out of the home, you better be ready to step up, and that's exactly what he did. That's the opener clip for the episode. Either that, or is it incest if they don't know?
Oh gosh. Okay. Yeah. So
Attack of the Clones.
Attack of the Clones, and also
Seismic charges.
Attack of the Clones. Freaking Camino goes crazy. I love Camino. I know a lot of people don't. I think it's one of the best Battlefront 2 maps. It's one of the best levels on Lego Star Wars The Complete Saga, because there is a dance floor in the middle of and then so all the little long-necked dudes get to dance with you. So also those freaking creatures are so scary. They're really creepy. And I like them, but they're weird. So that's cool. And then like Count Dooku being Qui-Gon's master.
No, he was his apprentice, I thought. No, you're right.
No, Qui-Gon was Dooku's apprentice.
You're right.
So
because that was the chain.
Dooku being Qui-Gon's master and then Anakin killing Dooku is such a really crazy correlation of like he's killing his original master's master. Like this, you're showing his progression. He killed his grandmaster, And so this is just like the best thing that the prequels does is it shows Anakin's rise to power so well, and then just watches his this downfall,
Meteoric
in
fall.
Revenge of the Sith. Like, just absolutely incredible storytelling that he does so well. And I think Attack of the Clones really, really shows that, and it hints at him being evil so well. And, you know, you really, but you still feel for him. Like, when he goes and kills the Tusken Raiders, you're
I don't
like,
feel bad.
dude, that's crazy. But I'm also like, dude, like, bro just, like, misses his mom and, like, wants
Right.
to be with this chick. And, like, you know, but also, like, feels underappreciated, because here's the thing. He knows he's that good, but he's, like, can't get no satisfaction. And, like, they don't appreciate him for what he is. And that's so incredibly deep and really real. And I think that they did a really great job at making Anakin an incredibly relatable character that the audience can feel for really, really well. And that's what makes Revenge of the Sith so incredibly heartbreaking, is you're like, dude, I watched you from the beginning and I really, like, kind of felt for you and you're related to you. And then you, like, feel for Obi-Wan because you're like, dude, I related to him too, and now you have to kill him. Like, that really sucks. And I think the Obi-Wan Anakin relationship progression is really, really solid in these movies. And I really like that they kind of took almost brotherly roles to each other.
Which I think is
Especially
interesting because in episode 2, he talks about how, like, Obi-Wan's like a father to me.
Right.
And then in episode 3, they, like, switch up and they're like, nah, we're brothers now.
We're brothers.
What a war does to people.
No, for real. What I'm thinking is, like, he's like, Obi-Wan's like a father to me. But then, like, so, like, this is their skill level. He's like, oh, father, and I'm the apprentice. And then when, like, Anakin got a lot better, now they're on similar playing fields. And he's like, oh, this is my brother. And they even have, like, really, like, sibling-like banter in, like, Revenge of the Sith. And, like you could say that it's cringe. I think it's funny, and I think it's realistic.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like, and I don't know if this, like, you can agree, like, let me know what you think about this. I think the opening of Revenge of the Sith has a huge Guardians of the Galaxy vibe.
Are we just jumping to Revenge
Like,
of the Sith?
I think
you
we
want to
can
just
at
dive
this
into it?
point.
I don't
Like,
have
let's
much more to
just go
say
right
about
into
Attack
it.
of the Clones. The only
Attack
other
of the
thing I
Clones
want to
is
say
good.
is prior to watching Attack of the Clones again, I didn't know that Padme was anti-army. Like, she
Yes,
was
I
very
picked up on
vocal,
that, and I was
which
like,
makes
interesting.
sense as to why they wanted to kill her,
Mm-hmm.
because Palpatine knew that the army, 1, was already being made, and 2,
Right.
needed her out of the way because she was the big vocal voice
Right.
in being anti-amassing an army.
Mhm.
So that's really interesting because that is kind of something that, I mean, we're not as murdery, I guess,
Right.
in the political sphere. It's just a lot more blackmail. But that is kind of what you do, is like your political opponent doesn't agree with you. So you're either going to bribe them, which Palpatine knew wasn't going to work on her. So let's resort to murder.
Right.
That'll work.
Dude.
And then when that doesn't
And-
work, he just kind of like forces her out and kind of like forces the issue.
Forces.
Forces the issue to like force something to happen, which then puts Jar Jar in a very interesting position.
Because Jar Jar's, he's Play-Doh. Like, he is so manipulatable so easily. And it's just like, here we are.
And he gives up that power that she would have fought for.
Yeah. And it's just, it's so tragic. But also, I think this time around on this rewatch, I appreciated Palpatine so much more than I ever have before because he was brilliant the entire time.
Yes, he's playing 8-dimensional chess, dog.
Oh, absolutely. And I never really, like, fully understood or appreciated how brilliant he was throughout this entire process. And he's really an incredible character. I'd also like to shout out, he might be one of the best actors in this series. He absolutely bodied the role of Chancellor / Emperor Palpatine. Like, he he carried that character so incredibly well. Like, shout out to him. Especially in Revenge of the Sith, like everyone's acting goes like from like a 7 to a 10. Like, so
They locked
I don't
in.
know. Also, I don't know if I'll get flamed for saying this. I think overall not, but in Revenge of the Sith specifically, I don't think it's Natalie Portman's best performance.
I don't think she's in it enough.
Well, she's barely in it, which I was kind of upset about at first, but it makes sense because she's hiding her freaking pregnancy.
Combined screen
And so
time
it's
of like what, 5 minutes? Maybe?
Well, even like her, like I remember her like talking to Anakin at the end on Mustafar hitting a lot harder, and I was like, all right, like come on, give us a little more. Like I don't know. I think maybe it just like. With Hayden Christensen, Ewan McGregor, and oh my gosh, he plays Palpatine, and I cannot freaking
Ian
think of his
McDiarmid?
name. I think it's between them, like it's kind of hard to hold a candle. in
Yeah,
this
I
movie.
think that
So,
was
like,
the issue. I
it's
don't
just a
think it's that she was
comparison.
bad. I think it's everyone was at a
Right.
12 and she was at like an 8.
Right, and so it's just kind of like. So anyway, but the writing of Revenge of the Sith is actually incredible. Like
Dude.
it is actually incredible.
Greatest Star Wars movie
Like,
of all time.
We'll get to that on our 3rd episode of the month, which we'll talk about. Anyway, yeah, no, it's the best of the prequels, and it's kind of like I was saying for Return of the Jedi, like Attack of the Clones is really good, but it's a lot of setup. It's a lot of talking about war and talking about going to this battle and talking about this, where Revenge of the Sith is it. It's doing the battle. It's doing this. Like everything is in motion at the same time. And then Order 66 comes in, and it's just like cinematic tragedy. It's a masterpiece. And I think like I'll also be real and be like, I hadn't really I didn't have a super strong opinion on Revenge of the Sith before this because I'd only seen it like twice, and I was kind of like, yeah, it's good. But watching it now as an adult and really appreciating the political side of it, it is actually a masterpiece. Like it's really, really good. So I don't know.
All right.
Here I am.
Revenge of the Sith, the movie that benefits the most from Star Wars: The Clone Wars. And I say that because it does a lot. Because the interesting thing about the Clone Wars is it's bookended. So, like, going into it, you know exactly where it has to end. And even the fact that Season 7, like, goes right up to, like, Order 66 is in the second to last episode. So, like, it goes up and starts running with Revenge of the Sith.
Right.
It's so hard to throw that out for historical context because Anakin goes through a lot.
Yeah.
That explains a lot of where he's at mentally
Yeah.
in episode 3. Because if you think about the Clone Wars, right before he gets in that fighter to go save Palpatine,
To go. Yeah.
he had a conversation with Ahsoka, who was this character who he thought he would never see again. And he tells her like, hey, when this is all over, because this is like the end of the war, let's
Right.
sit down and catch up.
Yeah.
And then he never sees her again. And then goes through this whole thing with
Yeah.
episode 3. And what is so heartbreaking is about halfway through, when Obi-Wan is like leaving to go to Utapau to fight Grievous, that's the last time they ever talk.
Yeah.
That is the last
we
time
pinpointed.
Anakin Skywalker talks to Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yes, that is. We pinpointed that exact moment where like this is it for them, which is heartbreaking.
And it's this
like,
brotherly exchange of like,
oh
hey,
my God.
it almost is the same vibes as the Ahsoka conversation where he's like, hey,
yeah.
let's wrap this sucker up with a nice
Let's
bow
get
and
outta
hang
here.
out after. Because
Right,
you
like,
know
it's gonna-
full well that once that war was over, Anakin was withdrawing from the Jedi Order entirely.
Oh, absolutely.
Because
right,
he was going to go
done.
live his carefree life with Padme and his son, or his kid, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
on Naboo. Because that's what she wanted. And he wants
Yeah.
whatever she wants. Because
Right.
he's just that down bad. So it's like very
happy
heartbreaking.
wife, happy life.
Yeah, he's a little too far on that extreme.
Yeah, he
So
What
much
I
so
will-
that he will not let his wife die and will dabble into the dark
and
side.
he's like, I will literally become a witch to keep you from.
I'll turn evil
He's-
if it makes me aware that you don't die.
Well, it's so. She's like, are you gonna be evil? And he's like, do you want me to be evil? It's just like, bro.
He's like,
be
"You
an
want me to?"
independent thinker. We all have that friend. Anyway, I think what is so cool about this though is you never doubt their love for a second.
No.
Like they are actually an incredibly solid romance together.
And you just want
And
them to be
it's
happy.
so sad. I just want them to be happy, and it's so sad. It's so tragic.
It's
like
a
legitimately
tragic love story.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
and I noted this. There's more I want to talk about, but again,
Right.
topical, contextual. Are you familiar with the theory of, like, one spouse dies, the other one dies shortly thereafter?
Yeah.
Because they've
Yeah.
been so intertwined. That's exactly what happens in this movie. And they're
No,
not
literally.
and they're not subtle about it at all. Because
No.
you get the parallel of Padme giving birth to Luke and Leia.
Mm-hmm.
And the little like medical droid says she's perfectly healthy. Like she's
Right.
perfectly fine. But for
She's
some
fine.
unknown reason,
We're
she's
losing her.
dying.
Yeah.
And I think it's because,
She knew.
like was set up in A New Hope and later reaffirmed in Phantom Menace, the Force is something that everyone has. You just have to be able to tap into it. And I think through Luke and Leia, Padme was able to very briefly access a level of the Force that no one was able to,
Yes.
and thus could connect to Anakin and could not find him.
Which you realize that she's actually pretty force sensitive in this movie, especially like when they're both like looking off longingly into like out of windows. They're feeling each other.
Yeah.
Like she's actually really force sensitive. And it's like that deep connection, and when it gets cut, it literally kills her.
Oh, here, this prescribes to my theory of why it should be the David Prowse Force Ghost, by the way. Because Padme herself, after giving birth to these two kids right before she dies, she like tells Obi-Wan there's still light in him. He's still in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Because she has made that Force connection. She couldn't find him at first. Like, if she's using the Force to try and find Anakin. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter that she just got choked out by Anakin. She knows
Right.
that's not him. That's not, like, it's
I
not
can fix him.
Anakin. And she knows that. So she's, like, searching through the Force while trying to give birth to these kids of, like, where's Anakin? He's here somewhere. Like, I gotta find him. And she can't find him at first. Which is why she starts to give up. But then at a certain point, she connects to whatever that small little glimmer of Anakin is. And here's where it gets really dark and really sad and really twisted. She connects to that little glint of Anakin, gives birth to Luke and Leia, tells Obi-Wan he's still in there. There's light in him, and she dies.
Right.
So then, when Anakin is in a state stable enough to search the Force and find Padme, she's not there. Which then prompts him to ask Palpatine, where is she? Is she okay? And Palpatine lies and says she's dead.
Mm-hmm.
Because Palpatine knows that Anakin now has the potential that he could
Of going
save her
back.
if he could find her.
Mm-hmm.
Or not falling into this trap at all.
Yeah.
So he says, no, she's dead. You killed her. He was very specific in the wording of, in your anger,
killed her.
you killed her. Which is what puts
Which is
Anakin
awful.
under Palpatine's thumb for the next, 20 years of living with the guilt that he killed Padme, and in that process also would have killed his own child. which is what I was saying earlier, is he's this empty, broken shell of a man who has no hope until Luke and Leia come around.
Luke and Leia. This is just such a good story.
And the fact that George Lucas was able to tie all of this, doing it out of order.
Yes.
This is something that is incredibly hard to do in order. Imagine doing all of it out of order, and you have to make everything tie up. It is so phenomenal.
And I also think, like, it actually hits really hard seeing it out of order. Like doing, like, that original trilogy to, like, establish a world and establish, like, this is what happens. Knowing what happens makes the prequels even more tragic because you're like, this is so
it's not a happy ending. You can't lie to yourself that it's going to have a happy ending.
Right. And so it's like, oh gosh, like it is legitimately a tragedy. Like it's a tragedy. Like not even in like a, like this isn't a descriptor, it's a genre. It's a tragedy. Like, man, this is good.
I almost started tearing up at the end of the Obi-Wan fight.
Dude, their freaking fight on Mustafar
where he's like,
is that the best lightsaber fight in Star Wars?
That is the best fight in Star Wars, period.
I think that's the best fight in Star Wars.
There's a lot, but that's the best one. There's a lot that
goes into it. Yeah.
And it's like,
I can't think of another one.
When he's like, you were my brother, Anakin. I loved you. Like,
I loved you.
It hurts.
Yes, dude.
Because I could not imagine having
to. Oh my gosh.
Because he didn't kill Anakin because he didn't want to do that.
No.
He didn't want to, which is kind of the same thing that Vader does in Return of the Jedi. Mm-hmm. Like, he doesn't want to kill this person, so he just kind of leaves him there. Which is a regret that is, like, expounded upon in Kenobi. But it's like, could you imagine amputating your, like, closest friend? And
who you've known since he was 9.
Who you've known for this long time. And then having to not only amputate them, but sit there and watch them burn to death.
Yeah.
That's
tragic.
Is tragic.
It's traumatic is what it is. It's just like
I couldn't imagine doing that. I can't imagine. And like Ewan McGregor sells it so
oh my gosh,
well,
he does such a good job in this movie.
Of like how painful that experience is.
Yeah. And even I think what gets me the most is so he does the whole you were my brother, I loved you, this and that. It's when you look at Anakin's burning corpse and he just looks at him and he just screams with as much power in his body. And he just goes, I hate you. And that is what, like, I'm like, oh.
Because you know that's not Anakin.
You know how much that cut Obi-Wan. Like, you know how much that cut. And honestly, moral of the story, bros before ladies.
Yep.
Dude, you can't let the women come in between you and the bros. And that is the moral of Star Wars over anything else. is yeah.
I also want to talk about something that's really interesting that people disagree on between the Clone Wars and the movies is the mentality of the clones for Order 66, because the Clone Wars
thinking about that too.
Spent 7 seasons establishing a personality and like a humanity to the clones, and how they follow orders, but they also like will very willingly break them when it like to do the right thing.
Right.
So then having Order 66 be this thing that they can't fight and they have to just do it. But in the Clone Wars, you see a lot of characters like Rex really struggles with it. because like he's conflicted of like this isn't the right thing to do, but like I cannot, like my brain is being overrode by this chip that I can't do anything about it. And kind of like what you brought up earlier is the Jedi are cool, but like they're kind of wimpy. They just go down without a fight.
Right.
But I think it was the sheer shock of it all was what got them killed.
I was saying earlier before we recorded, I was like, I feel like the Jedi were so boss and epic, and then the second it was Order 66, they went down like a bunch of punks. Like they were just kind of shot down, and I was like, guys, put up a fight. But also I'd understand, like, if your entire army just turns on you out of nowhere, you're not ready to defend, and there was also just a mass number. Like they were just completely outnumbered. Like that was the point of the clone army.
To one Jedi. Although actually, if you watch the Clone Wars, you'd understand a lot of these Jedi generals who are on the front lines trusted these clones with their lives. Like they thought nothing of it. They never would have suspected that anyone would turn on them like this. So when you have that level of trust, you just like, you don't watch your back. Someone else is watching your back. So the fact that they all would have stopped shooting and you're like, what's going on? And you're then like, they're immediately shooting at you. You don't have time to react. You're dead.
No. Yeah.
And here's my conspiracy theory of the week. I also would like to let it be known that according to Disney Star Wars, and a little bit of the originals, the only Jedi who survived Order 66 were the conspiracy theorists. Because there's literally an entire episode of Tales of the Jedi dedicated to Anakin teaching Ahsoka how to defend herself against a unit of clone troopers in case something happened where they all turned on her, and that is the only reason she survived.
And everyone was like, ooh, they're not going to turn on us. They would never do that.
You can't tell me that Neuralink, the little Elon Musk thing, is not the same as the clone chip. Come on. They're literally putting a chip in your head that works based off of your brainwaves.
Yeah.
It's the start, bro. I'm just saying.
They're going to execute Order 66 on us. Like, we're going to...
Who are the ones that get killed? I don't know. Anybody who doesn't have a chip in their head?
Right.
Who's to say?
Or, you know, whoever disagrees with the person in charge.
Also,
that's what
the
happened.
fact that Palpatine built up this clone army to be super submissive and follow orders and ultimately lead to Order 66 and his wipeout of the Jedi, to then immediately discard them like they mean nothing and switch to a volunteer stormtrooper army, just speaks so much volume to his character.
Yes.
Of how he doesn't care about anyone. Everyone is just a pawn to be moved on his 8D chessboard that he's playing with himself.
Yep. He is an underrated villain. He's incredibly smart. He's a puppet master.
You should watch The Bad Batch. Because The Bad Batch goes into that a lot. About the replacement of clones with stormtroopers. Because there are a lot of people in the Empire who are like, okay, but we already have the clones. There's a surplus of them. They are meant to follow orders. They're very well trained. You want to switch to a human army, like a soldier, like a volunteer army, where we have to refit everyone for armor and like train them, and like it doesn't make sense. And Palpatine's like, but the problem is, they have learned over time to be slightly defiant. So you need to build morale amongst all of these systems that we control. And that's why he's doing it.
The other thing is, like, also the clones had nothing to lose. Like, he had nothing on the clones, you know?
Right.
Like, he couldn't threaten them in any way. Like, they had nothing going for them.
Right. There was no way to keep them submissive.
Right. So, like, I understand, like, the clones literally their purpose was to execute Order 66
and build the
and
Empire.
looking at that training, like watching them train the clones in episode 2, I'm sure Order 66 was like their main thing that was drilled into them that they just could not overcome. Like that, in my mind, that's how it worked. Was they were like, from birth, we're just like, this is your purpose and you cannot override this. So that also makes it even more tragic because you're like, they were friends. Like it's awful. It's awful, but it's so freaking good. It's just, it all comes together and just so well, and it's incredible. And
Yeah.
I'm just saying, of what we've talked about today, 6 out of 6 bangers. Phantom Menace is a little slow here and there.
It's a little wonky, but it's
not
nowhere
a
near as bad as the
not
worst
a
sequel movie.
bad movie. No, not at all.
Do you
It's-
think that, because we've kind of had revisionist history on the prequels, and I think we
Right.
both have a little bit different point of view
Mm-hmm.
because we grew up with the prequels being the newest Star Wars. Do you think 5-10 years from now we're going to see the same thing with the sequels? Not from us, but here's what's going to happen.
From the next generation.
And I can tell you exactly what's going to happen. As much as I don't like the sequels, I don't. And maybe that'll change next episode after I rewatch them.
Right.
You cannot deny the fact that the sequels, as flawed as they are, brought Star Wars to a whole different generation.
Yes.
And this is their prequels. This is their
Yeah.
originals. This is what they grew up with. So they're going to view it differently than we will, having the full context. Because for
No,
a
you're
lot of
right.
people, there is like, their parents didn't show them 7, 8, and 9, or they didn't show them 1
Right.
through 6 first. They started with 7, 8, and 9, and then went back and watched.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also like so many pictures of these like young girls dressed up as Rey and like so excited to see Rey, or like they love
Right.
Kylo Ren. Like, say what you will about the quality of the sequels, you cannot take away that experience from people. And I think that is what 5-10 years from now is going to cause a cultural shift on the sequels, because the
Yeah.
majority of people talking about it, the ones who will have microphones like we do, will be the ones who grew up with it, who will staunchly defend the sequels. And if they're really wise, they'll understand that the sequels are flawed, but that won't harm their perception of them. That's how I am with the prequels. I admit
Right. Same.
that 1 and 2 are very flawed and they have their own issues, but I am still going to staunchly defend them because I like them.
Right. Right.
There's a difference between
yeah.
acknowledging that something has flaws and still enjoying it, instead of being a Sith and putting things in absolutes of like it's good or it's bad.
Whoa.
You have to be able to acknowledge the nuance of like, Phantom Menace is kind of boring, but I still like it. I still enjoy it. Like,
Right.
so that's very
That's
interesting.
That's an interesting
think
point that I'm very excited to explore in our next episode, which you'll have to tune in next week for, unless you have anything else to add.
No, I got
I
nothing.
feel like this was a really great retrospective of 6 movies. We did 6 movies in about 2.5 hours. So go team.
and next
Go
episode,
us.
we'll spend
Hey,
2 hours talking about half.
talking about 3. Guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Nerdiest Podcast. Thank you for your support. If you like what we do here, give 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and tune in next week where we will be talking about all the sequel movies in depth. And we're going to rewatch all of them, and it's going to be incredible, and we cannot wait.
dive
And
into
then
it.
after that, a week later, we're going to be ranking everything Star Wars on a tier list, and it's going to be so fun, and it's going to be an incredible little event for everyone to get together for this first annual Star Wars month. And if you like it, please let us know. Leave a comment, leave a review, send us an email, send a DM on Instagram at The Nerdiest Podcast, which you should be following, by the way, at YouTube at The Nerdiest Podcast, and go to thenerdiespodcast.com for merch. We will see you next week, actually, in the next episode for Star Wars month, and we cannot wait. We will see you then. But until then, bye.